These are the stories of ordinary British people, told through their diaries, letters, and memoirs, as their lives were changed forever by what they called the Great War. Stories of men and courage.
Dear Mother, you have not got anything to worry about over me. My company officer sent for me and explained that headquarters wanted a volunteer to go out that night. It would probably mean death. It would certainly mean glory.
Boom, bang, crash, crash, where's boom? A German battery was registering on the road with every shot.
Stories of women facing a changing world.
I'll see whether I cannot go one better than these big men with their cars, credentials and money. I'll see what I can accomplish as a war correspondent.
You don't mind if I get mixed up in rows and things about the munitions workers, do you? And if I do go to prison, well, it's all experience.
And stories of love and loss.
We all held our breaths, for we knew the goodbyes were being said.
We're an old veteran crew, and we got a bad start. And Leander got a bad start, but in the end, they won. And we'll win. And that's all there is to it. I just adore you, Hub.
Don't think, dear, I am worrying unnecessarily about you, because I know God can take care of you wherever you are. And if it's His will, darling, He will spare you to come back to me.
Uncovered from attics and basements, archives and libraries, these original accounts are here brought back to life as never before. August the 4th, 1914. Across Britain, people from all walks of life waited for news. The government had issued an ultimatum to Germany. Call off your invasion of Belgium or face war. That night in Whitehall, London, the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, bore witness to history.
It was 11 o'clock at night, 12 by German time, when the ultimatum expired. The windows of the Admiralty were thrown wide open in the warm night air. Under the roof from which Nelson had received his orders were gathered a small group of admirals and captains and a cluster of clerks, pencil in hand, waiting. Along the Mall, from the direction of the palace, the sound of an immense concourse singing God Save the King floated in. On this deep wave, there broke the chimes of Big Ben. And as the first stroke of the hour boomed out, a rustle of movement swept across the room. telegram, which meant commence hostilities against Germany, was flashed to the ships and establishments under the white ensign all over the world. I walked across the Horse Guards parade to the cabinet room and reported to the Prime Minister and the ministers who were assembled there that the deed was done.
The following morning, across the country, the news was greeted with excitement. Patriotic crowds surged onto the streets and to army recruiting offices. The government asked for 100,000 men to join the army. Over the next few weeks, they got 5 times that. In Hemel Hempstead, Hertfordshire, the local paper reported that the first man to reach the drill hall was a Mr. R. Evans. 26-year-old Reg Evans was already in the Territorial Army.
I thank God every minute very near that I'm some use to my country, even though if it isn't much. And I know this. We couldn't be in a more honourable war. I'm an Englishman, and I know that whatever happens, no one can ever tell me that I failed in my country's crisis. And please God, I get back safely and always have pride in the knowledge that I did my duty.
Reg was leaving behind a life of poverty. Born in a poor area of London, where 1 in 5 children didn't live beyond their 5th birthday. Reg had grown up at an orphanage, sent there in desperation by his mother after his father was killed in a riot. When he was old enough, Reg found work at a brush factory in Hertfordshire so he could be near her. Now, from the time he set off, Reg wrote to her every few days.
Dear Mother, we left Hertford about 10:30 yesterday morning in the pouring rain. By the way, always seems to rain when we're on the move. All the way along, at every station and window, there seem to be people cheering and waving. But London, well, it's got the war fever properly. As we were marching to church this morning, motor omnibuses were held up and the passengers leaned over the top singing and cheering. Private motors and taxis are dashing about everywhere with Union Jacks and tricolour flags. When I stood by the railings this morning, a lady handed me up a huge bunch of flowers to decorate our room with and said she was just going to church to pray for us all.
Reg's battalion went to a training camp in Essex, whilst they awaited orders.
We're sleeping rather rough here. Our blankets have gone astray, so we have to curl up in our waterproof sheets at night, but, well, I have to say, doesn't seem to be doing us much harm. Rumours are flying about all the time as to our ultimate destination. But look, we don't know nothing for sure, so don't believe anything you hear, for I shall write and tell you as soon as ever we know. Well, good night, Mother. I shall write again soon. Yours affectionately, Reg.
For most British people, war was a surprise. We had not faced a serious threat from Europe for 100 years, and few had thought Germany bold enough to start a war with the mighty British Empire.
It's a lovely war. Wouldn't be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the day.
Before August 1914,
It would have been utterly incredible for us to have imagined ourselves as soldiers. We asked to be sent as far away as possible from Bradford. I didn't want to be drilling in the park and going home to tea.
Twice I was held back from the drafts, but the third time insisted, and with 130 other men that night marched out singing merrily on our way to somewhere in France. Wonderful journey of dreams and romance.
In just over 3 months, 1 million men joined up, the fastest voluntary enlistment in the history of war. For 25-year-old Alan Lloyd, it was an adventure and a chance to prove his worth.
This is a life and death struggle with Germany. Everybody who could do something and won't is a beastly, unpatriotic kind of person. Now, I'm the last person to be a jingo Nate, flag-wagging and Union Jack hurrahing, etc., but I do feel that I might be useful, with my motor or without it, in case of an attack by Germany. And so, I've offered my services to the War Office, if they should want such a chap as me.
Alan was the fun-loving son of a rich Quaker family from Birmingham. His pride and joy, his custom-built sports car. He was in love with 28-year-old Dorothy Hewitson, known as Dodds. But her parents had vetoed any marriage. They disapproved of Alan's lifestyle and thought he wouldn't settle down. Only after months of negotiation was their wedding agreed, and Alan began planning his new life.
Got to find an English home for my wife and me. I found one beautiful old house near Melksham in Wiltshire. Oak-panelled throughout, but very near Melksham, which has factories, and I will not live within sight of a factory. I must hurry and get a farm. Surely you are not frightened because I said I might offer my services. Everybody must put their personal considerations in the background now. And I don't believe you'd be so selfish to try and stop me doing my part.
I suppose if you go, we couldn't be married first, Ali, could we? I can't realise what it means, my darling, for everything is ready for the wedding. And the Brigadier Generals say it will be a 3 years war, at least.
I have seen and impressed the board, and also passed the medical exam. At least the candidate who followed me said he saw the word "Dick" written against my name, so that's something. The board seemed to think I've got a very good chance of getting a commission in the cavalry. They told me the War Office would let me know the result. They couldn't say when. Probably we shall be able to get married before we hear anything.
In September, Alan and Dodds were married and went away on honeymoon. While away, he heard he'd been accepted as an officer in the Royal Artillery, but not whether he would be needed in France. Whilst men enlisted, many women wondered what part they could play in the war effort. Dorothy Lawrence, a poor 19-year-old orphan, dreamed of doing something that few men and no women were allowed to do: to be a war correspondent.
I pleaded with each big London paper. Please, just give me the barest means of getting out there. That is, permission to use the name of the paper. I don't want a big salary. Just give me enough to get out there. Leave the rest to me. Nonsense. Of course not. Do you think we're going to send out a woman when even our own war correspondents can't get out for love or money?
Journalists were very tightly controlled, so Dorothy set off via Paris, posing as a tourist.
If war correspondents cannot get out there, I'll see whether I cannot go one better than these big men with their cars, credentials and money. As the stretches of blue-grey water widened between England's mainland and our boat, I wondered whether I should ever set foot again in this country. When I arrived in Paris, I renewed my efforts to find likely opportunities for help for getting away. From Paris cafes, I chose my first 2 male assistants, 2 khaki soldiers. Hello, boys. I want to get out to the front as a soldier. Will you help me? My 2 new acquaintances, struck with the spirit of sport afforded by this adventure, agreed to help straight away. They undertook to find my outfit.
With the soldiers' help, Dorothy prepared a disguise as Private Dennis Smith of the Leicestershire Regiment.
Have you ever attempted to incline trousers in the way they should go on the female figure? They do not know the way, and suddenly you realise that neither do you. I was left alone to struggle with unknown buttons. Eventually I got in by a series of jumps, jerks and general tightening up.
Dorothy darkened her skin with furniture polish and cut short her hair. Then, with forged identity papers, she caught a train to the war zone. At the outbreak of war, Britain had fewer than 250,000 professional soldiers. But Germany invaded Belgium and France with 1.7 million conscripts. In overwhelming numbers, they swept towards Paris, only to be halted at the northeast on the River Marne. The fighting then zigzagged northwards, with both sides trying to outflank each other until they reached the coast. Facing overwhelming odds and suffering steady casualties, the British began sending over reinforcements. On November the 4th, Reg Evans received his orders.
Dear Mother, as I dare say you have heard by now, the first Hearts are off to France tomorrow. I am jolly sorry that we have had to go in such a hurry, as I was looking forward to coming home this weekend. You have not got anything to worry about over me. I'm in excellent health. I know you were disappointed that I haven't been able to see you again before I go on this little journey, so am I. But then that we cannot help. It is hard for you, but remember, Mother, it is hard for me as well. And you can make the parting easier or harder according to how you take this. After all, I'm only doing the same as thousands of other fellas. You would not be proud of me, would you, if I acted the coward now and tried to evade my duty, would you?
We stopped at several stations on the way where parties of ladies fed us with sandwiches, cakes and tea. Then, as we started off again on our way, wet eyes, sad faces and waving handkerchiefs, as we raised our battle cry enthusiastically, are we downhearted? No. Their tears were none of our business, for this adventure was far too thrilling and exciting.
It is fine to be in a long line of soldiers behind a band with all the people watching you. We do lots of drill, and soon we shall be shooting and trench digging and signalling.
I cannot promise, of course, when I shall be back home. That is not a matter I or any other man can settle. But please God, it shall not be long now. Well, good night, Mother. I shall often think of you, and always, as you know, with the best of thoughts. Reg.
Between August and October 1914, the British Army was pushed back through France and Belgium by a German army 10 times its size. On November the 6th, Reg Evans landed at Le Havre. Like many of his friends in the Hertfordshire Regiment, it was the first time he'd been abroad.
Dear Mother, we have arrived safe and sound after a delightful voyage. And everything okay. Don't you worry about me. I'm fine. You would laugh at the sights here and the way that people go on. We have travelled far. I thought of you a lot last night. Please send papers, as we will get no news here, I feel certain. I'll give my love to all, and accept the same for yourself. Much love, Reg.
The new arrivals moved up to a town in Flanders, where the fighting had been concentrating. The gateway to the Channel ports. For the rest of the war, it would act as the forward defense of Britain itself. Its name was Ypres.
Dear Mother, we marched here from over the frontier, all through Friday night, arriving about 11 in the morning, tired as you can guess. We haven't seen any Germans, only dead ones, though so near to them. Their shells and their Jack Johnsons we see and hear. The shrapnel makes a noise like the howling of a dog. But as long as you hear them, you are safe, because you know that they will not burst near you. But the others, the Jack Johnsons as they are named, well, they come through the air, 3 or 4 at a time, and without a word of exaggeration, the noise can be compared to nothing but the rush of an express train. And high up in the air shoots a huge column of dust and smoke, then others, and a terrific roar goes up as they explode. But if they hit the ground, they can leave a hole large enough to bury a motor bus. It sounds tall, doesn't it? It's a fact.
For many in Britain's new volunteer army, the first taste of war was exciting. Amongst them, 20-year-old James Butlin, a clever and sensitive young man from Dorset. He'd worked his way to Oxford University, but given it up to do his bit.
What a tremendous series of adventures I've been through in the last fortnight. I went into the trenches under the guidance of another officer. To begin with, the cold was intense, and a sharp frost every night. Secondly, Germans keep up a tremendous fire all night, far more than in the daytime. Of course, all the time bullets keep whizzing over your head and shells bursting all around you, but you get used to these kind of things.
The fighting around Ypres ended in stalemate, and winter set in. Both sides had expected a mobile, attacking war which would be over by Christmas. Now, weeks and months went by, with the front line frozen into 500-mile-long lines of trenches, stretching from the Channel coast to Switzerland. It was a kind of drawn-out siege, and by 1915, nobody could find a way out of it. Dorothy Lawrence's daring plan to report the war as an undercover journalist had taken her close behind the British lines. Now she set off towards the trenches on her bicycle.
Hours of uneventful riding passed as I steadily covered the miles between Amiens and the front. Gradually, civilians grew fewer, and at last none came my way. Very few cars disturbed the ride, and only far distant the steady booming of cannon. Later, however, heavy firing became very audible, and obviously not far away. A lonely grave was the first visible sign of war. Gunfire grew with reverberating noise. Well, I'd certainly managed to get near the trenches. All at once, I spied a soldier. "I've been keeping an eye on you," he said. Very soon I realised that this man, Sapper Dunn, could be trusted. He championed my cause from the outset. Before we could make plans, it was necessary, however, that I should be concealed. This fact Dunn carefully explained, and I grew slowly to realise that the presence of a woman at the front possessed dangers other than death. "You don't know what danger you're in," stated this middle-aged soldier. Quickly examining a row of cottages, I selected one as my temporary new headquarters. 3 parts of the roof stood open to the sky. The shell-struck door was falling from its hinges, and inside the room where I stood, there remained on the floor only a sodden mattress and a table. I started to move in.
Dorothy would lie low until, disguised as Private Smith, she could mingle with soldiers on the way to the trenches. It was a dangerous place to wait.
Troops passed along on the way to the trenches. They skirted my wall, but they never saw me. Lying on my mattress, I tried to sleep. It was difficult, though, to get 40 winks. Stray rifle shooting occurred between opposite trenches every time a head appeared above cover. Pong! I realised I was under fire.
As men settled in for a long war, the regular supply of letters and parcels from home was vital for morale. The army shipped 12 million letters a week, which took about 2 or 3 days to reach the trenches. Many wives and mothers took to sending home comforts too.
Dear Mother, many thanks. I received the parcel on Sunday, but the specimens of salad were not, I am sorry to say, a successful consignment. I don't think I should repeat the experiment. Dear Mother, just a line to let you know that I received the parcel safely and to thank you very much for it. Tomato was, I'm sorry to say, not a success, but everything else came okay. Before I get any further, let me get to the real object of this letter and to wish you many happy returns of the day. Your birthday, I mean. I wish I could have been there with you. But never mind, Mother dear. We'll have all the more to celebrate when I do return. Oh, dear me. Doesn't seem as if this war will be over for years.
Reg was about to be tasked with a very dangerous mission: to slip into the strip of ground between the 2 front lines, known as No Man's Land.
A company officer sent for me and explained that headquarters wanted a volunteer to go out that night and to report what damage had been done to the enemy's wire and front trenches by the intensive bombardment. The artillery would receive orders to cease fire for an hour whilst the reconnaissance was carried out. But so as not to raise suspicions at the lull, machine guns would carry on covering fire over the German lines. Whoever took the job on would have to go alone. It would probably mean death. It would certainly mean glory. Then, after a pause, he came to the point. Will you go? He asked. For a few seconds I hesitated. What could I say?
When war broke out, many people had assumed it would be over by Christmas. But Christmas had come and gone, and there was no end in sight. Throughout 1915, more and more volunteer soldiers were sent over to France. Amongst them, in July, Alan Lloyd.
Just a line written in a stiff breeze on the quay. I will write as soon as I possibly can from the other side and tell you all the news, you little angel. You were an amazingly plucky little small wife when I went away, and hubby was awful proud. Hubbins didn't want to leave her a bit, and feels very sorry now he has done so. But he'll soon come back.
A few days later, Alan wrote again to Dodds from his billet in Belgium.
Belovedest life. Here, we're comfortably installed in an old chateau. Nowhere near the firing line for a while. Lovely country about here of crops, awfully peaceful. One would never dream of war at all. Small wife would love it. When the war's over, she and Hubbins will have a little honeymoon and see some of these places which we pass through now.
Alan went straight to what was still the most critical point on the line, Ypres.
I came up to the line yesterday morning. The dugouts are very good. I went up this morning to the observing station to see how things worked. The station is within 800 yards of the German front line. Of course, as soon as I got there, the needs must start shelling, and I didn't mind a bit. They dropped 8 shells all round, and one fell within 15 yards of me. So I'm the first of the battery to come under fire. We are quite comfy here, and very safe. So don't be anxious and take care of your beloved self always.
Alan arrived at a time when repeated British attacks were failing to break through the German lines. The losses were terrible. The gains often only a few shattered trenches or a few yards of bloodied ground.
Dear old Basil, I write with the feeling of profound gratitude to my God I'm still alive. Since we've been through a terrible time. The Germans had concentrated their artillery near this point and shelled us continuously for 5 days and nights. Worse even than that. Our own artillery blundered. They dropped shells into our own trenches, which were meant for the German trench some 300 yards away. We were caught between two fires, and no place was safe. It was impossible to bury the dead. I'll never forget the sight of that trench.
Further south, journalist Dorothy Lawrence had been waiting for her chance to pose as Private Smith and slip into the trenches. If she was caught, she would be treated as a spy.
Shortly after thick darkness set in, I heard heavy footfalls. All of a sudden, the door flew open and in marched 3 men. "We've come to arrest you in the King's name," they said. "Oh, I see," I said. After a long ride, we arrived at Senlis. There a cross-examination took place. Unhappily, my sense of humour was aroused due to the appearance of my latest judge, a man whose normal occupation during the war was to examine German prisoners. As I happened to be neither German nor a spy, he proved to be rather unsuitable for examining an English girl. I told the simple truth and nothing beyond it.
If the army didn't believe Dorothy's story, she faced a long imprisonment, or even execution. Reg Evans was now ready to make his solo patrol into no man's land. Though dangerous, night reconnaissance was common, especially before a big attack.
That evening, I slipped out through an old sap head into no man's land. The din was terrific, though the intensity of our bombardment had died away. The enemy was sending up berry lights and star shells in reckless profusion, and to crown it all, the moon had rose early at the full, cloudless and serene. I wormed my way along till I reached the road on my right, and proceeded along the side of it till I came to a stupendous barricade of wire and trestles, which extended across for some yards on either side. I traversed for some distance in this close contact, till at last, seeing another huge gap in the wire, I turned to make the return journey. Only just in time. Suddenly, as if an inferno had been let loose, the artillery bombardment burst out anew. All around me fell the shells with tremendous explosions. The earth seemed to rock as I lay scared and stiff on its surface. And the sound of broken metal was like the rattle of a hailstorm as it pattered to the ground, with a noise insistent and penetrating even amid the louder roar. I really felt that my days were over. And as I resumed my awful journey through shell holes and debris, while all the time thinking I would never complete it. The state I was in when I finally did reach our trenches can be imagined. Challenged by a century, I was almost too exhausted to reply. Dear Mother, I expect by the time you received this letter, you would have heard the news that our Commander-in-Chief has conferred upon me the Distinguished Conduct Medal. The Colonel gave a splendid speech to our company this morning, and I can assure you that it has been the most wonderful experience of my life to know that I've got the confidence and honour of such splendid fellows.
Alan Lloyd received a letter with family news. His pregnant wife, Dorothy, was hoping for a baby boy she'd named David.
Belovedest wife, how is your precious self? I expect the baby will be a whopper. I write from my dugout in the observation post. Aeroplanes overhead, guns booming, rifles cracking, bullets singing away. It's the same thing day after day. We think the troops opposite us must be Saxons, because they seem rather sporting. They put up boards in the trenches to signify bullseye or outer or inner after our fellows have potted at them, and we do the same for them. It might be musketry practice. Take care of yourself, and think what a topping time we'll have after the war, so long as we win.
Summer 1915 turned to autumn and to winter, and still there was no sign of an end to the bloody deadlock of the trenches. For many, the stress was becoming too much to bear.
I find now that my nerves are all gone, and I tremble every time I hear a shell. It's not because I'm frightened, but I can't help it all. There are thousands of men laying all over the ground, and we cannot bury them. It's too dangerous.
The whole thing was rather gruesome for people with nerves. The fields behind were scattered with unburied French corpses. One was scarcely a yard behind my position in the trench. To make things more horrible, there were pigs roaming about, doubtless from the destroyed farms, eating the corpses' brains.
My nerves are not what they were. And I could tell you I could do with 3 months in England with advantage. John Bull is as optimistic as ever, but then he writes in England and in peace. Let him sit here in the trenches with a few trench mortars and rifle grenades falling round his way and write the same tonight. Feeling a bit vicious tonight. Also, I've not been up to form these last 10 days. Not feeling ill enough to be really bad, but just bad enough to make me look on the gloomy side of things.
As a second Christmas approached, thoughts turned ever more towards home.
I don't know if we shall be back by Christmas or not. I am often, well, I might say always, thinking of you. Oh, we will have some good times together again yet, and you will find me a stronger home bird than ever. Well, goodbye, Mother. With much love and best wishes to everyone, and please thank those who have written to me. Your loving son, Reg.
You'll be pleased when the baby David has arrived. Don't worry if it's a girl, belovedest. I shan't care a hang which it is. Don't worry your round head about Hubbins or about David. All will be well and you'll be quite all right, I know. Hubbins wants his small wife, his strong dog, and his Bijou car. But he wants the first of these so much that he wouldn't mind if he never saw the others or anything else ever again. So there. I want another honeymoon with small wife. I want it so awfully badly. We will have such a long honeymoon when we get it. Devon and Cornwall and Scotland and all over the place. staying and browsing away at all the nice, comfortable, old-fashioned pubs we know. And everywhere we've enjoyed our little selves so much. We'll motor all over Perthshire and Argyllshire and away up to the wilds of Caithness. And the Bishow car will hum with that lovely, dreamy, humming sort of hum which it has when it's going away with small wife and Hubbins on a long, long joyride. And won't it sing when it knows that war is over and small wife and Hubbins are together for always. So take the greatest care of your precious little beloved self.
At his post near Ypres, Alan Lloyd heard the news he'd been waiting for.
My ownest, belovedest little wife. My first news I got was Eric's wire saying he was an uncle. So I knew you were all right, but I didn't know whether it was a boy or girl. Then I got all the letters together, and I was off my head with glee. I did love it when I saw there was actually a letter from you. It was a lovely little letter. And Hubbins nearly blubbed when he read it, for he knew that all was well with his wife, and that she had got her heart's desire. I bet he's a topping little kid, beloved. And I know I shall love him awful much. More because he's his mother's son than for any other reason. All the brigade have been round congratulating me. And we had 2 bottles of bubbly last night. It seems funny to be a father.
Alan would have to wait for leave to meet his son. All the men knew they might never see home or family again.
My darling Mum, one is here confronted almost daily by the possibility of death. And when one looks forward to the next few months, this possibility becomes really a probability. I am therefore setting down to write to you briefly a few words which, in the event of my death, I hope may help to comfort and cheer you.
When I think of my poor dear chums who have fallen, I could cry. I've had to cry in the trench with one of my chums. He died. Gone with his mother's name, his last word. We've come out of this action with 4 officers out of 26 and 435 men out of 1,150.
Both sides are making strenuous preparations for a winter campaign. There are, as a matter of fact, no signs of the end whatever. Nothing to lead one to suppose that there will not be another winter in the trenches. It is questionable if flesh and blood can stand another winter.
Dear Mother, just a line to let you know I'm all right. We are having by no means an easy time. I don't know how long this war is going to last. And at times I quote myself the line of that hymn. We bear the burden of the day, and often toil seems dreary. Or indeed we are bearing the burden. And oh, what a heavy one. And then what's the next line? But labour ends with sunset ray, and rest comes to the weary. That's just it. Isn't it a glorious thought? Well, au revoir, and here's to a jolly Christmas. I shall be thinking of you all and fond love. Reg.
Dorothy Lawrence spent 4 months in army custody as a suspected spy. Finally, she was released back to London under one condition.
I promised not to divulge any information till I got permission. In making that promise, I sacrificed any chance of earning by way of newspaper articles written on this escapade. As a girl compelled to earn her livelihood, I lost, temporarily anyhow, all material gain by that promise. Under my arm I had a parcel, all that I brought with me from France. I walked along, past begrimed tramps in wretched sleep with heavy footsteps. In this big London city, I do not think there was anyone lonelier than I. Just home from the front, I'd nowhere to go. No friends knew that I'd come back, and my own house had been let to foreigners.
Next time, war hits the home front.
To have London in a state of war, awful as it is very thrilling.
Reg fights for his life on the operating table.
I've been feeling so rotten. I'm afraid the last operation was not a success, and I shall have to undergo another.
And Alan finds himself in the biggest battle the British have ever fought. The Somme.
There are a lot of indications that the war won't last a vast time longer. I think the Hun is getting enough of it now.